Hello, everybody. My name is Pretty, and welcome to my page known as the Dominican Voodoo Spiritualist. And today I'm going to be talking about hoodoo versus voodoo and how hoodoo and voodoo are not the same at all. So, a lot of people in the spiritual community have been having this conversation for years and years and years on end. People have talked about it continuously, multiple times, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it here on my channel. So, people seem to think that hoodoo and voodoo are one and the same, and they're not. I think people may think that hoodoo and voodoo is the same because of the way that they're spelled and the way that they sound. And sometimes people may think they're the same because of the people that they follow that either started in hoodoo and then they ended up becoming initiated in the different branches of voodoo. And that's why they could be confused and could be, thinking that it's the same because sometimes when people start off in one tradition, they end up getting involved in the second one. And sometimes what they learned or what they knew from the first tradition, they end up blending and mixing it in with the new tradition or the next tradition that they get involved in. So I'm going to explain what hoodoo is. So hoodoo is Southern American, most specifically Southern Black American folk religion. So when it comes to hoodoo, hoodoo is Southern American well, I don't want to say Southern American. Let me backtrack. Hoodoo is pretty much Southern Black American folk religion. Now, people often forget that, black people in the South, were slaves before they came, and, you know, the slaves from West Africa came over to the New World with their own traditions and languages and so on and so forth. But I think that people sometimes forget that, in South America, in the Caribbean, and in Central America, and even in Mexico, the slaves down there, they were allowed to practice and follow their traditions a lot longer and more in depth than the black slaves that were here in Southern United States because in South America and the Caribbean and in Mexico and in Central America, they were allowed to practice their African traditions for a very long time. But when the slave masters or the Spanish conquistadors or the settlers, they started seeing how progressive the slaves were down there and how proficient and how successful they were with their traditions and religions and whatnot, that's when they started to be more oppressive and they wanted them to be Catholic and to only speak Spanish and so on and so forth. Here in South Here in Southeast United States, the slaves they weren't allowed to practice their African traditional religions or speak their languages or do anything that was African, as soon as they got here. As soon as they got here as slaves, they almost immediately, assimilated into like Anglo-Saxon culture. And when I say Anglo-Saxon culture, that's more so of like British, German like culture because in the Southeast United States, especially in the Carolinas, you had more of like the British and the Germans that took over. And then when you go down to like Florida and Georgia and, Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, you had, the French and you had the Spanish and you had the Germans and the British and black and I don't want to say it was the same experience for each like slave group in each state because it wasn't. Because hoodoo does have its variations. Because a lot of times people think that hoodoo is just one way, one type, and that's it. That's not true. You have hoodoo from the Carolinas, like North Carolina and South Carolina. Then you have hoodoo from the Gullah Geechee people, and the Gullah Geechee people are South Carolinian island people. They have their own language, their own customs, their own traditions, and they have their own hoodoo that they practice as well. Then when you get down to Georgia, you have Georgian hoodoo, you have Floridian hoodoo from Florida, then you have hoodoo from Texas, you have hoodoo from Mississippi and Alabama, and of course you have hoodoo in New Orleans, and then, I know in New Orleans they have their own version of voodoo as well. So hoodoo is a remnant of the different African traditional. Well, I'm not even going to say the different. Well, I am going to say the different African traditional religions because when you do practice hoodoo and when you learn about the different variations of hoodoo, you do see some stuff that is similar to Ifa or to voodoo or even to Santeria to an extent, at least from my experience of doing certain like hoodoo spells or hoodoo rituals or like hoodoo baths and whatnot. Like I didn't start in hoodoo. I started in Haitian voodoo, then I went into Santeria, then into 21 divisions. But as I started learning about hoodoo and dabbling into it, there are some similarities with certain spiritual baths, with certain candle work, and different like root work and whatnot that is similar to the things that are done in Santeria or Ifa and and well, I'm not gonna say Haitian voodoo. I haven't seen anything in hoodoo similar to Haitian voodoo or anything in hoodoo similar to the 21 divisions, but I have seen some spiritual baths and some candle workings that are similar to those that are used and practiced in Santeria. So you do see the similarities right there, but I mean, of course, there's going to be similarities because the slaves who came from those parts where those African traditional religions originated, they were the ones who cultivated and created hoodoo. So, it's not a coincidence that you will see similarities in hoodoo and the other African traditional religions. So, there's that. Now, when it comes to voodoo, voodoo is very broad and there isn't just one specific type of voodoo. So, voodoo comes from a small country in West Africa called Benin. And voodoo is no, well, Benin is the birthplace of voodoo. I don't know why I'm talking backwards, but I hope y'all can understand what I'm saying. But I just noticed I'm kind of talking backwards. But Benin is the birthplace of voodoo. And so during the transatlantic slave trade, voodoo came with the slaves that went to the islands of Haiti, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Trinidad and Tobago. And when they settled on these islands, they cultivated their own version of voodoo. And then you have, New Orleans, Louisiana voodoo, where the slaves, well, I won't even say the slaves, more so of like the free people of color, because when it comes to like race and color in New Orleans and Louisiana, it's a lot. Their experiences with race and color is different from what I've read and seen than in other Southeast states and whatnot. So you have voodoo in Puerto Rico that's known as Sanse. Then you have Haitian voodoo. You have Haitian voodoo Asogwe and Haitian voodoo Sopwen. And then you have the 21 divisions or Dominican voodoo, voodoo from the Dominican Republic. And then you have well, I'm not gonna say that Obia and Miao that's practiced in Jamaica is a form of voodoo, but it is their form of a spiritual tradition or a spiritual religion. So in Jamaica, you have Obia, Miao, and I'm not gonna call that voodoo because I don't know too much about Obia or too much about Miao, so I'm not gonna say that that is a part of voodoo. But in Jamaica, they do have their own traditional religion that's practiced and that's followed. But the thing about Jamaica is that Jamaica is very Christian. So those of you who know about Jamaican culture, Jamaican people, Jamaicans love Jesus and Jamaicans love God. But when it comes to Obia and Miao, that's one of the things where it's like if you know, you know. And if you know people that do it, that's good. If you follow it, if you practice it, or, it's one of those things that's just amongst the culture. People in the culture know. But as far as it being an open or like a thing that's on display, you're not going to see that much in Jamaica or with Jamaican people because due to Jamaica being a Christian island and so many Jamaicans being Christian and believing in God, you're not going to see Obia and Miao openly spoken of or openly practiced or too many people from Jamaica acknowledge it that much. But, in Jamaica, they do have Obia and Miao, which is a traditional religion that they have there. You have in Cuba, you have Espiritismo. A lot of Latin American islands, they have their own versions. A lot of Latin American countries have their own versions of Espiritismo. You have Espiritismo Cruzado. I think that's the Cuban version of Espiritismo. And then the most popular one, Mesa Blanca, that is Puerto Rican Espiritismo. And then you have Venezuelan Espiritismo as well. I'm not sure what they call their version of Espiritismo, but they practice Espiritismo too. And then Espiritismo is not voodoo, so don't think that Espiritismo is voodoo because it's not. So Obia, Mial, and Espiritismo, those are not voodoo traditions at all. Those are what I would call like spiritism practices, but with Obia and Mial, those are more so of like traditional religions that are practiced mainly in Jamaica, but they're not tied to voodoo or anything like that. So I'm just gonna start back and stick to mainly just voodoo. But you have Dominican voodoo, 21 divisions. You have Haitian voodoo Asaway, Haitian voodoo Supuen. Then you have Sanse, which is Puerto Rican voodoo, and in I don't want to say I don't want to say the Shango Baptists are a part of voodoo, but when it comes to Ogun and Ilegua and Shango, they are a part of voodoo. Because when you practice or when you read or do research about a lot of voodoo traditions and their different variations, you will see Ilegua or Papa Legba celebrated, acknowledged a lot. You'll see Shango and you'll see Ogun because the Legbas have many paths in the different voodoo traditions, and the Ogus or the Oguns, they have a lot of different paths, and they have a lot of different paths or avatars or caminos or walks in many different voodoo traditions. So that's the difference between hoodoo and voodoo. Voodoo is very broad, it's not one dimensional. Just because a person says they practice voodoo doesn't mean that they practice all forms of voodoo. They possibly could because, they're in the spiritual community or just spiritual people in general. A lot of people do know how to practice different types of voodoo. You do have people who know how to practice New Orleans, Louisianian voodoo. You have people who know how to practice Haitian voodoo, Dominican voodoo, as well as Puerto Rican voodoo. And you don't always have to be initiated or be a priest or priestess to know how to do the workings or to know how to work with the spirits in those different voodoo traditions. When it comes to hoodoo, you have people who know how to operate and work in the different hoodoo variations. So when a person says that they practice hoodoo or that they believe in hoodoo or that they work with hoodoo spirits, they could be working with any variation of hoodoo. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I practice hoodoo. So that means that there's only one type or one version of hoodoo. And the same thing goes for voodoo as well. Voodoo and hoodoo have their many different variations. There are both of these religions are not one dimensional. They have many different faces. Um and then I think some people, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really sure why people get confused with hoodoo and voodoo because they're not even the same. Like in hoodoo, from what I don't practice hoodoo. I've just started like doing research and reading on hoodoo and things like that. And so far, what I've learned about hoodoo is that in hoodoo, they do call on, different saints. They do work with roots, flowers, and herbs. They work with candles and they do believe in God and they work with the church and work with the Bible. But my thing is with hoodoo, you can tell that it does have a lot of different influences from like the different European cultures, especially like the Spanish from what I've seen. Because from what I've seen with hoodoo, and like I said, there's different variations of hoodoo. The hoodoo that I guess I tap into more or relate to more is probably New Orleans, Louisiana voodoo, and that voodoo does have influences from like the French and the Spanish with the different Catholic saints that are used and the different herbs and the different roots and whatnot, and even the different prayers and the belief system. Because, like I said, there's different variations of hoodoo. So, the type of hoodoo that I work with probably would be considered like New Orleans style hoodoo. But from my experience, with hoodoo, it's not the same as a Haitian voodoo. Now, when it comes to Beninian voodoo, I'm not familiar with Beninian voodoo. I've never practiced Beninian voodoo, nor have I ever known anyone or met an elder that practices that. So I don't know nothing about Beninian voodoo. But when it comes to Sanse, which is Puerto Rican voodoo, Haitian voodoo, whether it be Supuen or Asaway or the 21 divisions or Dominican voodoo, I don't see, I don't. Now, one thing I can say with New Orleans style hoodoo, I do see similarities between that and Santeria and the 21 divisions. And I want to say just a little bit of Haitian voodoo. And I feel like it's because of the Catholic saints and there is the belief of Shango, and Shango is the Orisha of thunder and war and male virility. So I do see the similarities now from practicing and studying myself, so I can see how someone is confused, but it's like the way that the altars are set up in Hoodoo versus the 21 divisions in Haitian Voodoo and Sanse, I don't see the similarities. I don't see how it's the same. But if you were to do maybe like a simpler altar in Haitian Voodoo or a simpler altar in the 21 divisions or a simpler altar in Santeria like you would in Hoodoo, then I could see the confusion. But in order for a person to be able to differentiate between the different religions, you would have to be skilled and taught and just well aware and knowledgeable of these things. And my thing is that yes, people do mix the traditions and stuff together, but my thing is that the people who do, they know what they're doing, because everybody can't mix and be successful, and everybody can't mix and know what to do or like how to do this or how to do that. So you either have to be a priest or a priestess and know how to mix like that, or you have to be like a bona fide spiritualist in order to know how to successfully mix the traditions like that. Because people will say, oh, you can't be in the 21 divisions and be in Santeria too. Yes, you can. Oh, you can't be in Haitian Voodoo Asowe or Haitian Voodoo Supuen and be in Santeria or Isheshe. Yes, you can, because there are tons of people who are initiated in Santeria and in the 21 divisions. And you have people who are initiated in Haitian Voodoo and in Santeria. And then you have people who are in Hoodoo and they're initiated in Santeria or they're initiated in Haitian Voodoo. So you can practice multiple religions, but the thing that people do that messes people up, especially if you're a priest or priestess, you are a priest or a priestess in your respective religion, but then when you initiate people, you initiate them into the other religion that you're initiated in instead of the one that you presented yourself as. Because that's happened before, because you have a lot of people in that are priests and priestesses of Santeria, and there'll be a priest or priestess in Palo as well. And then sometimes people will think they're being initiated into Santeria, but they're getting initiated into Palo. And so that's where you have to be careful at. And then that's why it's also a good thing to make sure that you know about the religion before getting into it. Like, people online are so against being aware or knowledgeable or understanding or well aware of different cultures and religions before getting into them, because people feel as though books are not real, books are not what you need, and books tell lies. Now, there are a lot of books written about a lot of the different African traditional religions or ATRs, and some of them do have lies and some of them do have fibs and myths in them, and they're not accurate. But you do have some books that are accurate. So it doesn't hurt to read the books that are accurate. And then if you don't trust books, then go to someone who's initiated a religion that you're interested in, or go to a priest or priestess, and they could give you insight and give you what you need to know about these religions. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I really don't like how in the African traditional religions, a lot of people within these religions, they talk to people as if they are slaves. Because as black people especially, we have to remember that when we were slaves, it was against the law for us to read. It was against the law for us to know the law. It was against the law for us to be educated or for us to be aware of anything outside of being a slave. And a lot of times in these traditions, they talk to us like that. Like it is against the law for us to know the culture, the tradition, the religion, or even the names of some of the gods, or the names of some of the Loas, or the Orishas, or the Mysterios, or some of the Apollo spirits. But it's not. Like a lot of stuff in spirituality is common knowledge now because it's been broadcasted so much, it's been talked about, and it's been discussed so much, and everything that is in the public or mainstream is not always wrong or inaccurate because you do have some accurate information that is public and that is mainstream. So don't pay attention to people that want to demonize public information or demonize mainstream information or demonize the fact that so much of this stuff about the ATRs is public. Because to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the internet, a lot of these religions probably wouldn't even be able to survive if it wasn't the internet. Because I feel like some people in these religions are so secretive to the point where if you don't talk about this stuff or teach it, it's gonna die with you. And that's what's happened to a lot of our religions in the world, especially ancestral practices and ancestral beliefs and systems. Like we're so secretive, we're so private, and we're so just tight lipped about stuff that the stuff goes to the grave with us. And the people who come after us, they don't know who they are, they don't know what they were supposed to believe, or they don't know anything about their ancestors because we were too protective of what we were taught, of what we were given to teach and whatnot, because there is, power in secrecy and there's sacred in secrecy. But sometimes when you're too secretive or you're too private, it can end up doing more damage than good in the long run. So social media is not all bad when it comes to spirituality. TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all these other things that have been used to broadcast spirituality, it's not all bad. But sometimes the people that are behind it may not be as good as we want them to be. And sometimes the information that these people are putting out is not as good as we think it is. But it's possible to, I'm not going to say it's possible, but that's why it's important to use discernment. That's why it's important to use your intuition. And that's why it's important to use common sense. If it doesn't look right, sound right, or taste right, or if it just looks so confusing, then don't believe it and turn away from it, because I know everybody's not psychic, everybody's not a seer, everybody is not intuitive, and everybody doesn't have, gifts like me or any other person. But use common sense. That's the best thing to use, because you do have a lot of scamming, you have a lot of bad promotion, and there's just a lot of, bad information or a lot of bad people out there that are just trying to scam people into, doing this and doing that. And then another thing is, and I know I was just supposed to be talking about hoodoo and voodoo, but I just feel the need to say this too. I feel like there is too much emphasis on being initiated, and there's too much emphasis on being a priest or a priestess, because not only is being a priest or priestess very expensive, but you need to know what you're doing when you become a priest or a priestess. Being a priest or a priestess is not all about making money and getting rich off of this stuff. Yeah, there are a lot of rich people in this business. And there are a lot of people who have become very successful and very rich, and they have met a lot of successful, famous, and very influential people with their walk and with their calling from the spirit. So I'm not going to lie about that. But there's more to that than just being famous and being seen and being in the know. You have to be good at what you do, know what you're doing, but most importantly, know who you are and whose you are when you're getting involved in this stuff. And another thing I'm gonna tell y'all is when you are a priest or priestess, or when you're initiated, things will go good for you, but you may have a lot more to deal with than you did before getting involved with this. Like a lot of priests and priestesses won't tell you, but not only do you need to be in the religion, but you need to be protected in it too. Because being a psychic or a seer is not always an easy job. Like I've been in spirituality for 5 years. I have read and have done spiritual work for tons of people, but it has not always been an easy job for me. I have been attacked by some of the best in the business. I have had almost everything done to me spiritually as a spiritualist for me simply reading for people, divining for people, and doing spiritual work for people. And I have had to get more initiations done and even had to get certain types of protections done to protect me by me simply reading people. Because a lot of this stuff that people are dealing with nowadays is not simple ABC 1, 2, 3. You have people that are walking around with muertos on them. And when I say muertos, muertos are pretty much, I'm trying to find a way to say it so I won't get in trouble on social media, but muertos are dead spirits. And I know some people say that muertos are pretty much, ancestors and whatnot, but muertos are pretty much death spirits. You have some people that are walking around with muertos on them. And when a person has muertos on them, that is sickness, disease, trauma, and all types of bad things that are on them. And if you don't know how to cleanse yourself from that, how to get that stuff off of you, or how to loosen those things or break that stuff up, you can be in danger. That's why when you see us do spiritual work or read, or even when it comes to us being on camera, we're protected. We have things on. Our heads are covered because this stuff is real. We can be attacked on camera. We could be attacked through the phone. We could be attacked, while doing spiritual work and everything. And you have to be covered when you do that stuff because spirituality can be a life or death situation because it is true. You can die and be put in the grave with this stuff. Like, I know people have seen the interviews and have heard stories and have, talked about New Orleans voodoo and Marie Laveau and snakes and hoodoo and, Eve's Bayou and all this different, romanticized, voodoo movies and stories and whatnot. I have been in this stuff. I have met people and I have even been attacked and had stuff put on me and thrown on me that probably could have took me or put me in the grave. But it didn't because I am covered and I am protected. And I'm not saying this stuff to scare anybody away from spirituality or to try to scare anybody from getting into it, but this stuff is real. And this stuff is not anything to play with at all. Because when you read, divine, and do spiritual work for people, it could be a life or death situation. So I hope I didn't scare anybody. I hope I didn't, make anybody feel bad, or I hope I didn't, scare anybody away from believing or practicing or becoming interested. But you guys know that, I'm honest, I'm sincere, and I tell it like it is. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe, and leave positive comments in the comment section. And yes, I am initiated in the 21 divisions as well as Santeria, and I do readings for people. I have linked my website in the description box of this video. So if you're interested in booking a reading with me, feel free to book a reading with me. Have a good day.